Welcome to Discover Indie Film that is brought to you by Sherman Oaks Film Festival and Film Invasion Los Angeles. My guest today is Lesley Hoyt-Croft. Hey, Lesley.
Hi, Jeff.
How are you?
Doing great.
I'm doing all right. So this is going to be a fun and challenging introduction in a way because there's so much to mention. But first, we'll talk about you. First, you're here to both talk about your screenplay and documentary and some other stuff, yeah?
Yes.
Including, I might as well name the screenplay, Princess Di and the Lesbians.
Yes.
Which talk about two subjects that draw attention.
Right.
Like you understand.
Right.
Marking,
I like that as
right?
a writer.
Right. And by the way, you've probably heard me say it, an original title just kicks butt.
It does.
When someone's film has an original title, it just, I tell you, it sings. But we have a long history.
Yes.
So I've got to tell everybody that, first of all, if they're a loyal listener, and you know, there are some out there, but Hayden Croft has been on this podcast, I think 3 or 4 times. 4. Thank you, Mom. And he is yours. He's your boy.
He's my boy.
He's your boy. And he had a film in the first ever Sherman Oaks Film Festival in 2016, New Age, Old English. Don't know if we met at that one, but then he was back 2 years later with Last Wish at Film Invasion LA in 2018. And that probably is where we met, I bet.
Well, I was definitely at one in Sherman Oaks.
Yeah.
And was that...
Well, 4 Junkies was at Sherman Oaks in 2019.
This was before that. It was very early on. So maybe it
was the very first one.
Maybe it was.
That was, you know, the secret about Sherman Oaks Film Festival 2016 is that I was in chemotherapy and should not have been there.
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah. Can you believe that? I was so dumb that I could not let go of, it was the first festival and it was our second one because we'd done Film Invasion a few months earlier. And I thought I could pull it off, and I did. And then the Monday, that was a Saturday and Sunday, and then Monday I went in and got my blood checked, and I had no white blood cells, and the doctor was like, I told him, no, I spent the whole weekend home. But I was like...
You were lying.
I was an idiot.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's...
Yep.
I probably looked like hell that year, but no one knew. Everyone just thought I looked terrible. Whatever. It's not bad when a bald man goes through chemo. But anyway, I'm all good.
Good.
9 years later, 10 years later, I'm 10 years
later.
away from my cancer experience. So anyway, wow, what a great introduction to bring in cancer. But so we met in 2016
yes.
when Hayden wrote and directed that one. He's been coming back with scripts. He writes stuff with Raphael Buisson.
Mm-hmm. Yes, get that French accent in.
So he's a super creative person. And additionally, Hayden will forever have a special spot in my heart. And I know, as a parent myself, when someone likes your kid, you like that person, right?
That's exactly right.
We have to. But when Hayden came in here to do like episode number 48 of this podcast, he handed me a book that he'd self-published of short stories called Kisses from Strangers in the Dark, which I'm not a Stephen King guy, so I didn't know that was a Stephen King quote.
Yes, it's an homage to Stephen King saying that short stories are like kisses from strangers in the dark.
Exactly. But, I took the book and I just, you brought it. And it is so good. And I was really impressed with so many of them. And honestly, so many of them were cinematic. I might have nagged him going, okay, you've got to adapt a couple of these.
Yes, I still think he should.
I think he should, especially the one with the family arguing with
asteroids
meteor.
And something.
Asteroids and something. I really think that would be a great short.
That would be a great short story.
Right?
The End of the Earth.
Maybe you can talk him into directing again.
I will.
Because now he just wants to write. He doesn't want to direct. But he's a good director.
I know. But one of the things that I really like, and I'm sure this isn't true everywhere, but at least from him I know, he's so supportive of like Raphael Buisson. He just really can't say enough positive about Raphael and what a great director Raphael is, and of Andrew Baxter and how wonderful Andrew is as an editor, and Evan Purcell who reads his things, and you, Jeff Howard, because you have been so good to Hayden. Like, okay, everybody, here's what Jeff did one time. Hayden was writing this book called Oh No No Ho, although it has different titles.
Yeah,
Jeff
I was going to mention it. Yeah, go ahead.
Went on his vacation, and took a 350-page book to read on his vacation, a 350-page book that didn't have a buyer yet. And he read the whole thing and gave Hayden notes on it. So that is a supportive friend.
Well, plus, it was great because I just threw it on my Kindle, and I was the guy who, after every Sherman Oaks Film Festival in December, my wife loved to go on a cruise between Christmas and New Year's, so I'm like, that's my chance to like unplug from the phone and read. I always read like 3 or 4 novels. So when Hayden gave me this novel, I'm like, I'll throw it on the Kindle and I'll start it. I read it end to end. I guess you can't say cover to cover when it's on your Kindle,
right.
but cover to cover, and
yeah.
It was really very good.
Love that.
Just a great novel.
I love
And
that
to read
book.
a novel, because, pulling off short stories, that's one thing. Pulling off a novel, like you said, 350 pages.
Right. And it's about North Hollywood, NoHo. And it's just, one of the things I really like about the things he writes, and I like these when other authors do too, though, is that they're not just telling a story, they're looking at larger concepts of social justice, inequality, social class, diversity, who lives there, what's going on in their lives. It's sort of like the people that are all around us, and particularly if you live in NoHo, and they're living right there, but a lot of times they're completely unseen. Anyhow, and it's so funny.
I mean, because I don't think it's a spoiler. And by the way, he sold the book, right? The book's gonna. Didn't he tell me? Oh, I'm not supposed to. Okay.
Well, yeah, you aren't.
Because he named a publisher.
Yes.
To me, last time I saw him.
We can't talk about that.
Okay, we can't talk
or
about
I'd
that.
have to kill you.
But is the title now "Sand Ramsey's a Dick"? No.
No. I heard him tell you on that podcast that I was the one who came up with that title, which is true. I mean, Sand Ramsey is a dick for the same reason as Princess Di, because I thought there was an Academy Award-winning movie that had the word dick in it that like 2 years ago. Do you remember that? Yeah. And I can't remember what it was. But anyhow, I thought that was a funny title, but I think it'll have NoHo in it somewhere. I'm not positive.
Either way, it's an excellent novel. I'm sure I haven't read it now. That was probably 3-4 years ago.
Was it really? Oh, okay. Well, it's
even longer. Heck, it could have been pre-COVID.
I don't know.
Because I think it might have been. But either way, excellent novel.
Yeah.
And if and when it comes out, I'll actually be buying it.
Okay, good.
Because heck yeah. But so now we don't have to discuss his writing anymore because his mother has. By the way, again, the mother-son thing is so fun for me, is that he even said something to me along the lines of, well, with my mom's last screenplay, she's got more laurels than I'll ever hope to have. He's like proud that you have outdone him on the festival circuit with the script.
That's funny. Well, he's so supportive, and that's super nice. And, it's really because of him that I kind of got into this or knew even about it,
About the festival circuit.
Well, about the festivals and even about writing, because when I was growing up, you didn't, I never heard anything about filmmaking or anything. I mean, and most of this time is in Arizona.
You're supposed to tell me where did you grow up in Arizona?
Yeah. Well, I moved to Arizona when I was 14 from Louisiana. That's where you're hearing that little bit of an accent.
Yeah.
And then, so here, if you think about being in Phoenix, and I say, well, there was nothing there. Well, you know who else is from Phoenix and is older than I am, and is Steven Spielberg. So evidently there was some way to find out about making film.
Yeah, but I believe he didn't make it out
to
to L.A., I think, for Cal State Long Beach. I don't know if he went to high school here either.
No, he went to high school in Phoenix at Arcadia High School.
Yeah.
And then he might have come out here for his senior year, but he got rejected. He didn't get accepted at USC.
No, he went to Cal State Long Beach and then ended up managing to direct TV like Columbo or something. I forget. But
well, he sure figured out how to make film. So
I
mean, evidently it was possible, but it wasn't possible for me, and I never thought of it, So, so I go on with my life.
But you were a creative person.
Well, I always loved to write, but then I got into academia. I became a professor. But you're writing academic articles, that go before peer-reviewed journals, things like that.
Publish or perish situation?
Yes, exactly. And then sometimes I would write ones just, like when the horse Genuine Risk was running, and I thought I saw a bias against Genuine Risk because it was a she. So I would write an opinion piece. I wouldn't necessarily do anything with it, but I just had to get that out. A genuine risk or the real thing. About what it was about this horse. That
I remember in the 70s there was a big Battle of the Sexes horse race. I remember,
yes.
And then it was tragic because they made a big deal out of it, and then one of the horses broke a leg during this.
Right.
But yeah, there was a lot of
I think that was seven
sexism
bells.
in this
I'm not
country
sure,
managed to
yeah.
get in even into horse racing.
Even into horse racing,
Yeah.
Exactly. Even
Crazy.
into horse racing, and then.
But wait. What was your subject as a professor?
Social and behavioral sciences. So that is perfect for someone such as myself because I have a lot of curiosity. They say that a sociologist is someone who walks down a street at night and they look at all the houses, with light coming through, and they're wondering what's going on in there. What are those people doing? What are their lives like? And that is absolutely, I kind of want to know everything. I mean, some people would just call that nosy or call neighborhood watch or whatever. But anyhow, yes. So that was my subject.
So, and as a professor in that range, you had an outlet for writing.
Yes, but it wasn't. It was definitely academic. It wasn't like creative writing about anything I wanted. Although I did write that just on my own. But writing about like doing research on different subjects and things like that.
So on the side, you did a little creative writing for yourself.
Yeah, I just
when you had time. Obviously, it's tough.
It is, yeah.
Having a career as a professor and raising a family and writing all at the same time. It's
and I didn't actually have a long career as a professor because I got my doctorate at Arizona State University, and then I went to Kansas to teach there, and I loved it. It was just a wonderful department. It was great. But I left a perfectly good job to move back to Arizona for a man. That is not usually a high percentage plan. Fortunately, it worked out. It was great. All was good. But you know what I mean? Because I always just assumed I'd be a professor.
You got pulled back home for love.
I got pulled back for love. And so anyhow, then I started a business, and it was in counseling, which I had training in during graduate school. And then went into the area of drugs, like drug programs for companies, providing counseling for people who had drug issues within the companies, doing testing for, like you don't want to be in your airplane at 10,000 feet and have your pilot be drunk or on coke or something. And, the FDA or the DOT kind of testing, and then also it had a component, and this part was the part that I did. We had other people doing everything else, but it was as an expert witness in cases, many of them capital cases, where the person had committed terrible crimes, and there was a drug issue involved in the crimes. And it doesn't excuse the crime. You can't just get drunk and have something happen and say, oh, well, I was drunk, or oh, I was on cocaine, or whatever. But a lot of times there's a story there, a long story. And so the attorney wants to show that story. The person's already guilty, but it's just, what will the sentence be? And they want to show the judge, this guy, when he was 12 years old, had his mother inject him with heroin, and he started, drinking when he was 6 years old. And, we think, 6 years old, what? He was drinking alcohol at that age, and so on, and just about how different the person's life was and how they could have come to make the choices they did at the point they made them, and that they'll be in prison, most of them for the rest of their lives. So this was after the finding of guilt, but before
So related to sentencing.
Related to sentencing. And so you look at everything in that person's life, going back to when they were children, Child Protective Services, their schoolwork, their arrests, their, police reports, everything.
And I mean, to me, obviously I can get labeled a bleeding heart or whatever, but just even in practical terms, the danger to society that person presents if given drug treatment is very different from a violent criminal who wasn't high when they committed crimes. So I'm saying I have respect for what you were doing, because it's better for society to help these people and then let them be a productive member of our society, paying taxes and doing things, instead of just treating every criminal as if they're cut from the same cloth.
And in these cases, mostly these people really were going to prison.
Yeah, they weren't going to get out.
They were not going to get out.
Right.
They had already been found. This is,
right. These
such
were
a
terrible.
terrible
Right? These weren't
crime.
petty. These were misdemeanors.
These were definitely felony. A lot of times,
but it also
murder.
tells you something, that if there had been something happened, if these kids had been rescued earlier,
right? If these kids had been,
if there was a way to protect, then we wouldn't have the largest incarceration population on the planet.
Yeah, but very sad and depressing, to see. But you can't go there. You've really got to look at the facts.
Oh my God, you could have become a crime fiction writer with all the stories you were exposed to.
I didn't lean in that direction.
Did not lean, no. But yeah, it must have been just the stories of all these life stories. It must have been just completely, whatever.
Just dramatic, terrible.
Overwhelming.
Seeing what lives the people led.
Yeah.
Before they got to that awful point in their lives, and to see what, in many cases, what drugs had done to their families, and of course the victims. What about the victims of these crimes? And they're just innocently going along, and then pull over to the side of the road, and somebody wants their car and comes up and kills them or whatever. So
absolutely
it's tragic.
Yeah. So you were dealing with some of the roughest parts of humanity.
Mm-hmm. Going to the prison a lot. And interviewing people, and that's actually an interesting aspect, Jeff, in that by the time I would see people, they were very often, of course, not on drugs. Not to say there aren't drugs in the prisons, because I assure you there are, but usually I would first see them at the jail, and just seem like everyday person, because by that time they aren't using drugs. They aren't high when I'm talking to them. So it's pretty different.
Yeah, they've literally detoxed.
Yeah, exactly.
While
Involuntary
being held
detox.
During trial.
Right.
Yeah. Lord knows what their body went through.
Yeah.
For a little while.
Exactly. And, just so many of the drugs are so addictive. So addictive that, it's a wonder people are able to get off them. And, of course, so many aren't. And they end up losing their lives.
Dead or in jail?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, terrible.
Yeah.
Well, so that was an interesting phase.
Yes, that was an interesting phase.
Right after being a professor in Kansas, you ended up doing that.
Yeah, doing that in Phoenix. And so, a long career as a business owner. And so all this time, that's all going on. But I had this desire to still write, and so I went back to ASU and took like a screenwriting classes and playwriting classes, and it was just so great because it was so creative. People and I always used to think creativity meant being able to be an artist, like do a picture or work with art or whatever. But, writing, obviously I was an idiot. I just didn't know that, yes, you can be creative in writing too. That's why they have a course called creative writing. But anyhow, so I went back and did that in my spare time. And I started, just writing like that. And then a friend of mine tore a little piece out of a newspaper And it said, this is a class at Scottsdale Community College, and it's called Documentaries for Social Change. And, I thought that is right up my alley as a social scientist, wanting to see social change in certain areas. That sounds great. So I signed up for the class and went to it, and it was, really just what I wanted. It was wonderful. And you had to make like a 3-minute or 5-minute documentary that was by the end of the class. The one thing that they did not accentuate in the syllabus was that you actually had to know how to make a film, meaning filming it, editing it. I knew nothing.
Right. So it was intended for people with the filmmaking skills who wanted to learn about the documentary side. And particularly documentary for social justice.
Right. And that part was great for me because every single thing I've been doing in my life before then, like, reading all the documents and finding out about the person, figuring out how their lives went, where things went off the rails, all that was perfect on that part of it. But I didn't know the other part of it. So I am a complete Appleite. I love all Apple computers. So at that time, Apple had like 2 hours of personal training you could go. And so I went to the Apple store every day for like 2 or even 3 hours. And I just sat there and learned Final Cut Pro. And, it was very difficult, but it was great, when you're learning the editing and then learning everything else. And in my film, I was using a lot of vintage footage, from the 60s and 70s. And so I was able to get that, and I never could interview the subject of my film because he was in prison. But the way I got to the subject of that film is that one night, these 2 young women came in that class, and they were from the Arizona Justice Project. And they said, is anybody here interested in doing a film on one of our clients? If you are, let us know. And they said what they did, that they defended people who had claims of actual innocence, who were in prison. They have nowhere else to go. The people have exhausted every appeal, everything. And so I said, yeah. And so I met up with them, and that was just the greatest day because I'm still involved with them all these years later. I love the Arizona Justice Project. It's like under the auspices of the National Innocence Project. California has an Innocence Project. And as a matter of fact, our executive director, Lindsay Herf, went to law school here and was involved with the California Innocence Project for many years before going there. But, they just do such great work. I mean, these are people who should not be in prison. These are people who did not do whatever it was.
There's DNA evidence proving it wasn't them, and yet they're still in prison and even death row.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I know. Every time you hear these stories, you just say to yourself,
what?
If there's scientific evidence now that didn't exist then, why the heck does it take so long to correct?
Yeah, it takes, even once they have the DNA, and it's not all DNA, because some of them are false confessions, but and we always think, why would anyone falsely confess to a crime they didn't commit? But there are lots of reasons.
Lots of reasons.
And we know that. And then also there's manifest injustice. Like we have a client named Lewis Harper, and he was like 20 years old. He's down in South Phoenix. He was a black kid, and he was selling crack cocaine, which of course was more common among black people, and powder cocaine among white. But he sold that cocaine to an undercover officer. It was $20 of cocaine. He did it. He was guilty. He walks into his hearing, and the judge says, okay, you're going to prison for 50 years. And he said, I looked around, I thought, who is he talking to? Who is he talking to? Sure enough, the judge sentenced this 20-year-old for $20 of crack cocaine to 50 years in prison. So after he had served like 21 or 22, he gets in touch with the Justice Project. There was nothing they could do, meaning for any kind of appeals or anything. But they went to the prosecutor's office and said, don't you think 22 years is long enough for this crime? And fortunately, they said, yeah, we do. And so he was released. But that never would have happened. He would still be in there today on probably only about year 38 of his prison sentence had that not been the case. So that's a case of manifest injustice.
Absolutely. And we don't have the time for it, but I think we all know the statistics that powder cocaine that was popular among an affluent white community,
Right.
the same amount of cocaine with the same addictive qualities, actually there is no difference.
Right.
Those people who got light sentences or even let
Probation.
off with a warning, so to speak.
Yeah.
And that young African-American man gets 50 years.
Yes. So it was just crazy.
insane.
So I met with these women. These are just great young attorneys who are so full of just enthusiasm, commitment for what they're doing, hope, And so they said, well, here are our cases, choose which one you want. And I chose the case of a man named Bill Macumber, who had been in prison for 38 years. And it turns out for a double murder that he didn't commit. And all this evidence came forth later. And so that was my first documentary. It was, well, I heard you on a podcast recently calling it a featurette, because I think it was about 28 minutes. And instead of a short.
That's a little, maybe that'll take off at some point. That's our festivals specifically created the featurette length category, so that under 20 minutes is a short, 20 to 60s featurette, and over 60s feature, because there's so many wonderful films in that 20 to 60 range that, as you know from being, in your introduction, I didn't get to mention that you've been a juror for us.
Yes.
But as a juror, it's not fair to juror to say, look at this 37-minute documentary,
right,
and look at this 14-minute documentary, and decide which gets. I mean, the 14 is going to win more.
Yes.
It's going to get higher ratings because we're all human.
Right. That's exactly
the amount
true.
of time you ask us, it's just it's a different beast. It's a different type of storytelling, that length.
Yeah.
So that's why, who knows? Boy, I'll be really annoying if 20, 30 years from now, featurette's common everywhere. And I'll be like, by the way, I started that shit.
Yeah. Well, see, I'm quoting you on it. And so that was the first one. And I knew nothing about entering festivals or anything. And this was like maybe 2008. And so it was really hard to sort of, at least for me, to figure it out. It took forever. And then it won in the LA Feel the Real Film Festival. It was an honorable mention in there. But I remember being pleased, but I didn't even know what a big deal that was, to actually, win an award in a film festival on that one. But so then, of course, I'd fallen in love with the Justice Project and these women and the people they were working with and helping. And so there was another person named Louis Taylor, and he had been convicted of 29 murders with the hotel fire, the Pioneer Hotel fire in Tucson in 1971. And they said he set the fire. He was 16 years old. And he was there. I mean, he was helping people, get out of the building and everything. But they convicted him of that. And he spent 42 years in prison. I mean, he was essentially a senior citizen when he got out. But what had happened there, well, a couple of things, but fire science had progressed so much that they were able to say this wasn't arson. It was, and these fire scientists are so incredible today. I mean, they use engineering and everything. So the long and short of it, getting back to the film, is I did this film on Louis, and
The Ballad of Louis Taylor.
well, that is actually a music video.
Oh,
The
that's a
Ballad
music
of Louis
video.
Taylor.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's actually a really fun one to watch because it's only 4 minutes long, and you can look it up on YouTube, The Ballad of Louis Taylor.
But he went to jail. He went to prison for most of his life for something that was not even a crime. No one had committed a crime.
No.
It was whatever, an accidental fire not caused by a person.
Right.
And they sent this person to jail.
And he's in prison for 42
years.
until the Justice Project started.
And it wasn't that
working
someone
on
else
his
did it.
case.
It's that it wasn't done.
No. And there was even evidence that the prosecutor's office had sent the information off to, I think it was the Van Nuys lab over here in LA, and had gotten information back that indicated that it wasn't arson, but they never brought that up or showed it to the defense team. just so many things like that. And then, and Louis, well, I should get onto the filmmaking part, but just one thing. Louis was half black and half Hispanic. And he had like 8 or 9 siblings, but his mother was the Mexican American part. So they spoke Spanish at home as a first language, and they spoke English too. But, he's out on the side of the road selling tamales, shining shoes, doing all this. But that makes him an outlier already in the sense that he presents as black, but his life is that of a Spanish speaking person. And then when you get into prison and you have these different gangs, and one time Lindsay Herf, the director, said, "Well, Louis, what did you do when the blacks got in fights with the Mexicans? Like, where did you go?" And he goes, "Lindsay, I just go in the corner and beat myself up." And she goes, "Louis, I'm being serious." He goes, "I am too," because he didn't fit in. He didn't fit into either group, which is real hard to be there. And so anyhow, but Louis, I was able to get a lot of footage on after he got out. And, I really wanted to use the song Walk On By. And I didn't end up using it because it was so expensive to get the rights to with just a little part of it. But you mentioned the music video, and I love this kind of thing that happens. There's a musician in Tucson called Carlos Arzate. And now everybody, by the way, who's lived in Arizona, they all remember that Pioneer Hotel fire if they're old enough. You say it to someone of that age, everybody remembers it. Well, Carlos isn't of that age, but he was just hearing the news about this guy and what happened and got out. And he, being a musician, he thought, I got to write a song about this. And so he wrote this song called The Ballad of Louis Taylor. And it's just great. It says exactly what happened in his life. And he just hears it and he can't help himself. He's got to write it. So, I had met Carlos and we got together. And so that's where we did the music video. I did the video part to Carlos's Ballad of Louis Taylor. And so that's what's on YouTube. But it really does tell the story of everything that happened. And then you see Louis at the end. Now Louis is going to be 72 years old on April 7th, I think. And he's living in Tucson still. And that's where the name of the documentary I did on him comes, this damn town. Because that's what he said once about Tucson. He goes, yeah, this damn town. But, it still holds him there. And that documentary did really well. And one of the festivals it went to was Ethnografilm Festival in Paris. And that was a good one because that was kind of actually like a more sort of academic festival, meaning for sort of social issues and things like that. And I remember someone at the festival said to me, well, when he got out, did they give him a house? And did they give him this? And I said, no, he got nothing. And of course, he'd never worked because he was only 16 years old. Yeah. So he had no Social Security. He had no health care when he got out. I mean, he wasn't covered by health care. He couldn't, it was very hard to get a job. He did get a job like at a movie theater, picking up out in the parking lot and so forth. But yeah, so we're still friends with Louis, and he's a wonderful guy with the malaprops. He says the funniest things. Real smart guy, but he's great on those.
God, I almost wish another attorney had said, "Okay, I'm going to do your civil suit for because county government, state government, whomever locked him up." I do think that he's owed something.
Well, absolutely. I mean, that's talk about life. That's his whole life.
Yeah.
And he does have one lawsuit pending. There were several things. So there is a company, but, it has to go through the Ninth Circuit like California. And, they're looking at legally what is it. And they've dismissed everything except for one count, which I think is prosecutorial misconduct, I think. I'm not sure about that, but it goes on for so long. Prison is not a healthy place to be in any way, so it's very hard for people to live long enough. In Arizona, just in June of last year, was the 40th state to pass a bill, I think it was Senate Bill 1500, to allow compensation for that. Nothing. People got nothing. You know, you wrongly take their lives and they got nothing.
Madness.
Yeah.
Honestly, listening to you, I can't help but think. I mean, I think about the kind of shows we see in this new world, and you know, there's all this true crime stuff that I'm not particularly a fan of, but I mean, documentaries based on the Innocence Project and this Justice Project, I like there should be a series. There should be a series of, you know, 30 to 60-minute documentaries of all these cases so that people, right? I mean,
and there are a lot of shows about them, and actually they're kind of I think some people are getting, I can't remember what they call it, some kind of fatigue, like innocence fatigue or something like that.
yeah, well,
But
how
there are so
horrible
many.
to be overwhelmed by all the innocent people who go to prison.
Well, you know, I mean, we have over 200 people.
And yet all the serial killers will watch over and over and over. I mean, come on.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
terrible.
Over 200 people, I think, who were on death row have been exonerated. I mean, if you think about that, 200 people. And at the National Innocence Project, it's just wonderful because it's all the Innocence Projects and all their clients. And the clients get to come and they're paid for to be there. And then they announce them and they have on a big screen, so-and-so, this many years, wrongly in prison. And at the end, it comes out to like 2,987 years wrongly spent in prison by the people who were exonerated, who should not have been. It's maddening.
It is maddening and sobering.
Yeah, and some of them, you know, once they, like with the DNA cases, and again, not all the cases by any means are DNA to prove innocence, but with those, they'll have the DNA, which is not the person at all, and then it'll take them another 10 years to be able to get out of prison. I mean, that's ridiculous.
Yeah. Yeah, you hear about those stories too.
Exactly.
It's a nonstop flow of injustice, and needless to say, it's very often an underrepresented community member.
Oh, absolutely.
It's very rarely an upper or middle class person.
Well, and of those 200 people on death row, I think 65% are black.
Yeah.
And I don't know what it is of people of color in general, but yeah. And some of them, the ones that we're seeing at the National Innocence Conference, you know, they are old. I mean, and they've been in prison all their lives, and it's wonderful to see them out and about, but you also think, oh my gosh, what a waste.
Yeah. Yeah, they lost a lifetime.
They lost their lives.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Everything. Education, family,
well,
career.
like Louis, you know, you think about Louis, of course he could never get married because he was in there. He doesn't know how to drive. He doesn't, like people who are about to be 72 years old typically have grandkids that they're being around. You know, they have a family. Almost all his family, even as large as they were, almost all of them died while he was in prison. His mother, his twin sister, several of his other siblings, they all died when he was in prison. So now at 72, he doesn't have that kind of family that most people do when they're his age because he never had the opportunity. That was taken from him.
Terrible.
Yeah.
But oddly, it must feel good to help and make films about it.
Well, I love it.
And I'm sure that his appreciation must be.
Well, I'll tell you, mostly it's being able to be around these people who are working, slaving every day in this Justice Project and
right,
that are
those heroes.
meeting the people. They really are. And then, you know, for me, it was, it really was very cool for me. I mean, even the process, you know, and thinking, okay, how do I put this together? You know, like everybody says, no doubt, how do I tell this story so that it's the most meaningful? How do I tell this story with an arc to the story and about what happens and what happened then? And, you know, what are my resources? And then, you know, like with his, I went to the Arizona Historical Society, and I had to pay $1,200 for footage of back at that time of him going to court. But I tell you, Jeff, it was so awesome, like seeing Louis, who I knew at the time I first met him. He was, like 60 or whatever. And seeing him as a 16-year-old kid going in and out of the courtroom. And like I met his attorney, the person who had been the attorney at the time. I flew to Colorado and met him and interviewed him. And then the police officer who was on the scene that night, I found him, and he was living in Tucson. And there were cars going by. It was not ideal for interviewing him. But, he told me so many things. Like he went into the police station. Louis was there, no adult, like 6 police officers around this small 16-year-old kid, grilling him for all these hours. And he walked in and he said, that kid didn't do it. I told him to go and knock on doors or whatever it was.
Yeah, to help people.
Yeah, he's telling me, and he said he walked in and told them, they go, we got our guy, don't go on from there. So, having those people is interesting. And then, like I found this other attorney who knew that the prosecutor was very bigoted. And so anyhow, it was very interesting. And it was an after the fact story. The Justice Project made all this happen and come true for Louis. But Louis had to plead no contest. He was not allowed to be fully exonerated. But the thing was, it was like, okay, you can stay in prison for 3 or 4 more years. And, you can get killed at just about any time in prison. You've been in here 42 years, but if you want to stay in prison 3 or 4 more years, we will retry you again. Or you can plead no contest and have time served, and we'll let you out now. He would not confess ever, even when he was a 16-year-old kid and was badgered and battered for all those hours. He would never confess to it because he said, I did not do this. I'm not going to confess. That was quite the strength of character for a little kid like that.
That's unusual.
Who had nothing. He had nobody behind him, nothing. And so, so that's Louis Taylor.
So he got his freedom, but legally never got his exoneration.
Right. And
even though it's obvious.
Well, there are so many. The Justice Project has so many factors that didn't come in. If he had
if he'd suffered through a retrial.
Yeah, the Pima
it was a slam dunk.
No way. Yeah, exactly.
But why wait 3-4 years for that?
Well, if you've been in prison 42 years, you're going to want to get out because you could really, you could die of natural causes at any time if you're that age and you've spent that long in prison. He didn't have any teeth, because all his teeth had fallen out. He's, just all this bad stuff.
Yeah.
So.
My goodness.
Yeah. So, but doing those documentaries was very rewarding. Working with those people, seeing, getting to know Louis, who's just such a character and somebody that I'm very fond of now, and just everything associated with it was great.
Yeah. And as powerful a subject as that is, I guess I'll be true to the theme of the podcast and bring up guide it towards filmmaking, right? Because I could talk about this forever, the social justice side, but it also gave you a love of filmmaking.
Yes.
From not just you already had a love of justice, but it also gave you love for filmmaking, I assume.
Right, and because my son was interested in film,
right, you did these documentaries before he was even thinking about it.
No, he was when he was in high school and all that. Like he came out to UCLA for film school in 2 summers. He got college credit for it. He went to Princeton for whatever amount of time in a summer and got college credit for it. So he was into it.
Right. So you had a creative kid.
Yeah, I had
from the beginning.
Kid, and it was just interesting seeing his enthusiasm and how much he.
So he was pursuing writing while you were making these documentaries.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. I think
I'm just making clear to anyone listening that he followed you in the...
No, he didn't follow me. I followed him.
You both went, well, fine, into filmmaking.
Right. Yeah. And I'm trying to remember how it all went, but essentially, he was just watching him making these films, coming out to LA. I mean, all the most talented people are out here. They obviously, just like the people who are into singing and dancing and directing go to Broadway for,
Yeah, LA and New York.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's just, you're just really up against such talented people, and hopefully with such talented people. And so, just seeing him and how he kind of started out and made this one and then the other one, and that was.
And he kept progressing and getting better at it. So
and going to festivals. So that's when when I started going to festivals to see his film. Then of course I was seeing all these other films, and he was making shorts, and I love shorts. There, and you guys had these categories of shorts, where we could just watch the shorts, and I just loved that, going to your festivals. And then he and I went to Sundance many times. We'd just go to the shorts.
Yeah.
Once in a while we'd see a feature, but.
Well, and I forget when, because of course he had a film in our very first festival in 2016, but somewhere early on, we got the idea to have a filmmakers board where alumni would help decide award winners. And so Hayden would be invited onto that. And I clearly remember when he's like, because I had met you, and he's like, my mom could join the filmmakers board too. And I was like, absolutely. So then you got to start watching everything, even from home.
Yes.
And you got to choose your categories.
Which I always choose comedy shorts and sometimes documentaries, because those are the two areas I like. I don't watch horror, Jeff, because it scares me, but there are so many people.
You don't have to do the horror, and you don't, drama's up to you if you're in the mood for drama.
You just have so many. And so that's a wonderful experience.
And I'm sure there's very few things that make people want to make films more than watching lots of them and seeing how people are bootstrapping it and making shorts for. I think one of the reasons why we love shorts is they're really made for all the right reasons, because it's not like anyone writes a 14-page screenplay and goes, okay, if I shoot this, I'm set for life.
Right.
Like, you're making that film for all the right reasons.
Right.
Whereas,
well,
not all films are made. There's nothing wrong with making a film trying to make a buck. But if you care about the art of filmmaking, shorts are where it's at.
And just seeing how, not just with my own son, but seeing all these other filmmakers, like how they came to it, what happened. And I love the Q&As at these festivals. And I do have to say, I particularly like yours because I think you're just a wonderful facilitator or whatever. And one thing I hate is when an audience member will ask one question and then every single filmmaker answers that same question, and then the Q&A is over. And if it's not a question that interests you in the first place, it's not good.
Yeah.
And then
that's not a Q&A. They call that the firing squad, right? They just line up 5 to 9, sometimes 10, 11, 12 people, and they all get to answer they all get to talk for about 30 seconds.
If that, and I just don't like that at all. So I really love those Q&As. I mean, to me, that's as interesting as the films, because you get to really find out. And I wish the Q&As were even longer. Like, I know you've made a real effort to make them longer, and I wish they were every time because there's a lot I want to know about. How a lot of times they'll say, how'd you get the idea?
That's the only reason this podcast exists, is that even our 10 to 15 minute Q&As are not long enough for me.
No, they aren't. They aren't. And you really want to know, inquiring minds want to know. And that's one I've got. So it's really something to hear the backstory and hear, how some of these people scrapped whatever they had together, and it wasn't always money. And sometimes it was friends, and they come together and they make something. And then their experiences together form a sort of a social network, and then hopefully they go on and can make a living at it. Hopefully,
you know, and hopefully the marketplace eventually. I mean, it is interesting. There's interesting things happening, but as you know, like I've been annoyed now for a decade that there's not really a home for short films. There's not really a good home for them.
Right.
There's some YouTube channels. There's some this and that. But yeah.
Well,
I've
like
tried,
Hayden has
but-
sold some of his films to some company in the UK. I can't remember what it is.
Yeah, there's some websites. Yeah, I've known of
It's
some.
I This isn't very good that I can't remember, but maybe it's called Shorts TV or whatever. But it's still hard. I mean, unless you put them on YouTube for free, you know,
Yeah.
it's hard with that. But yeah, because I really do love shorts, and
And they're really wonderful. And it really is. It really is. It's a very cool thing.
well, just think of trying to tell a story, tell an entire story, beginning, middle, and end, in 6 minutes or 12 minutes or 15 minutes. You know, you're telling an entire story. That is really hard. You know how in writing, a lot of times they'll say, well, you know how if you write a screenplay, you're cut. But a lot of times in writing, if you're given an assignment and they make you tell the story in 1 page, and that is harder than telling the story in 10 pages because you can go off wherever you want.
For sure. All right, so you're going to these festivals, supporting Hayden, and then you decide to write a screenplay, yeah?
Okay, so we've got to go back in time.
Yeah.
Okay, Hayden is 13 years old. He decides he wants to play ice hockey. So I said, okay. I go to Polar Ice near our house, and I go in to sign him up. And so there's a woman there doing my registration, and she says casually, you know, we have a women's league too. Why don't you play? And I laughed, and I said, that is hilarious. I said, I have never even skated before. And Jeff, she looked me dead in the eyes and she said, that doesn't matter. That was wrong. That was so wrong. So I said, okay. And you know, that hockey equipment's expensive. So I thought, well, this is great. I'll get double duty. You know, at that time, he and I were about the same size. We'd have to have different skates, but I could wear all his pads and everything, everything except for the skates. So that's good. So I got on a hockey team. And again, it is not good if you're trying to play hockey and you can't skate. That is terrible. Not a good way to start. And so I was on this one team, and they were so mean. They were just awful because they didn't want somebody as bad as I was on the team, you know. So they sort of kicked me off. And I was, you know, crying in my whatever. And just, I think I'm going to quit. But I really liked it because one of the things, and this is probably true, well, it was only true for me with hockey. Like I was a bicyclist before and stuff like that for exercise. But, you know, you can go and your mind can go everywhere bicycling. But if you're out on that ice and you're trying to stay up and not fall, I mean, I just had to concentrate on that so much that for that hour, my mind was just blank. So I wasn't worried about anything. The stress of everything that's going on in everybody's lives who have full careers and kids and everything else, that was gone for that amount of time. So I went to a tournament in Vegas, and there was a group there. I played on a team, and there was a group there, and they were so wonderful and accepting of this terrible player. So I went back, and it was time to sign up for the next one, and I said, I want to play on this team. And they said, well, who do you want to play with? I said, all of them. So it was just, you know, this great group of really accepting women of me, who was different and awful at hockey. And they were, you know, were very encouraging to me, wanted me to get better, were willing to help me and everything. And so, you know, I started playing, and eventually we, you know, we changed our name to, from whatever it was, the Predators or whatever, to Anger Management. I brought my hockey jersey in for you to see. It was like a smiley face, and it had a tooth knocked out. And
I'll grab an extra picture of it right now.
Okay.
Mid-podcast. Look at that. I've never done that before, but we'll throw it on the website. Why not?
Exactly. And then Mine was number 7, Dr. Strangelove.
Oh, that's a
Yeah,
pretty
I
good
know,
cinematic
Peter.
reference.
Yes, exactly. So anyhow, and so a lot of these women were lesbians, and they were, they all had very different jobs, like everybody. But I mean, a lot of them were, like tennis pros or golf pros or athletes of that level. They taught people those sports, and they usually worked at very upscale places. And I remember them saying, I can't say, I have to hide the fact that I'm a lesbian because I would be fired. And I thought, oh my God, imagine that all the time.
Yeah.
And then one woman said she was teaching a man, and she liked this man. He was a really nice man. And she said, oh, are you going to go to the LPGA or whatever it is, the women's tournament? And he goes, no, I don't want to go see Dykes and Spikes. And so and then there was a woman there she had gotten a foster child, and she wanted to adopt her. And this little girl, oh my gosh, she was, a baby. She was like 3 days old when the woman first got her. And she'd bring her into the hockey room, and then as the little baby grew, she'd fall asleep in the hockey bag. And so she was worried sick that she was not going to be able to adopt this child because she was a lesbian and she didn't have a partner. And so anyhow, just all these things. And of course I knew all this anyhow, having that be something I was interested in general.
As a sociologist, it certainly, it certainly was. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I played, and I was the oldest person, of course, playing out there. Not only could I not skate, but I was the oldest person. And we had a woman on our team named Lynn Fry, and she had a daughter named Lindsay Fry. And so sometimes when we wouldn't have the whole team there, Lynn would say, well, Lindsay can skate with us. Lindsay was 11 or 12 years old at the time. We could not even see that girl going up and down the ice. She was so fast. And she played in the Olympics, not this one, but the one 8 years ago. So she ended up being an Olympic hockey player.
Wow.
And but believe me, she wasn't. She was just fooling around. Yeah. It's not like, oh, yes, I played hockey with an Olympian. She's just somebody's kid who was helping us out. But so this whole thing was incredibly interesting. We traveled together to tournaments. The locker room was so much fun. I mean, I just loved that aspect of it. I really loved the women. They were very supportive of one another.
Camaraderie.
They were, all animal lovers. They rescued animals. They fostered animals. They, very just wonderful women. So I'm going on, and so then I'm still, taking writing classes. Well, what happened, and this may have happened to you before, is I thought, I've got to write this story, this damn story. I cannot get on with my life until I write this story. And it, so that nags me for months and months, and then it starts stalking me, and I just realized I'm going to have to write the story or go crazy. So, I started writing the story, and then, I must have edited it 150 times and then kept taking classes, reading all the screenwriting books and everything. And then I started, entering it in festivals, and it was doing really well. And so then over time it gets to here. And the story is about this black woman. She's the protagonist. Then the deuteragonist is a Hispanic woman, although I don't think you ever know that. It doesn't really come up. And not the people on the team are a real diverse sort. And I didn't do that on purpose, like, oh, yes, let's make one person this, one person that. That's pretty much the makeup.
It's true to life.
Yeah, it's true to life.
Yeah.
The one thing that is not so true to life is having the black woman, because the whole time I played hockey, I only played with one black woman, and that was in a tournament in Tucson. But get this, she turned out, her name is Shawn Proctor, and she turned out to be the woman who went into space as the commander of that space shuttle like 4 years ago or whatever. She's this incredible scientist, doctor, so here she was playing hockey.
Playing hockey.
And the only black person, I ever knew. Of course, I'm playing women's hockey, but not much is going on with the men's either in terms of that. And now, they've got a Black Girls Hockey Club. It's on Instagram, and they're, trying to give support to people because it's expensive to play hockey. And trying to bring, and then in Canada, they changed it to like Girls of Color or something like that, not just black girls play hockey. And So
that's where Princess Di is one of the characters in it.
Yes, Princess Di.
And it is not the Princess Di of history.
Of England.
Yes.
No, but if you look at it, the actual Princess Di, I mean, she was a very compassionate person. She put herself out there in terms of people who had AIDS at a time when it wasn't popular to do so. She was very embracing of outliers. So it's not completely crazy, although I wasn't, thinking of her as Princess Di. One of my characters' names, the protagonist, is Diane Washington, and she's Princess Di. And
because everyone has a cool nickname.
Yeah, and the other woman gave her that nickname when they were playing hockey when they were young girls. And she says, well, why did you call me Princess Di? And she says, because that's who you were. You're good and you're strong and you're kind and you help other people and you're like a princess. And this my protagonist doesn't fit the mold of a princess in the traditional sense at all. But in terms of what she's like, on the inside, she has all the
and
qualities.
In the modern sense, absolutely, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And then in my screenplay, she has her sister's child. So she has her niece. She's been raising her since birth because her sister is druggie of the first order, is with every man who will get drugs from her. And then the sister tries to get the daughter back. And Di just knows, what? There's no way. What? Why do you want her back? You're always getting money from me. You never come visit her, nothing. And then she figures out that the sister is now dating this guy who is a real sleazebag, and that it's that guy who wants the daughter. So this is, it's terrible. And Di is, really provided a great home. The young girl is just a wonderful kid, 13 years old, doing everything right, just a sweet young girl. And so the mom meaning Diana, who's had her, she never went through, though, with the actual adoption. And that was on her for sure. But now she's paying for it. So,
So that can be complicated, too, I'm sure. But and you started it many years ago, I assume.
Oh, Jeff. Yes, I think I.
So because I'm leading you into talking about that this is a moment now when hockey stories, particularly with the gay community, there was a huge sensation last year.
Exactly, that's really.
And here
true.
you are on the festival circuit with
this hockey movie.
With this hockey movie, Princess Di and the Lesbians.
Yes.
And Heated Rivalry was the biggest thing in the world last year.
Yes.
And blew everyone away and proved once again that no one in Hollywood knows what's going to work.
Exactly. And that came out of Canada, right? Originally?
They tried all over the place. No one would fund it except up in Canada. Came from a team, Jacob Turney, who I was a huge fan of everything he has done.
Letterkenny and
Shoresy and then Heated Rivalry. And I know there were shows before that, and I believe he started as an actor, but just made this amazing show. And what do you know? Everyone went nuts for it.
Exactly.
And perfect timing. You're hitting the festival circuit and racking up laurels for Princess Di and the Lesbians.
And the most of those it seems like came before that came out, and that my timing now just happens to be good, I hope, because I sort of finished the festival circuit in October, just a few months ago. And then I said, okay, now's the time to market it. And then, whoa, lo and behold, we get the women and men's Olympic hockey team. By the way, we have the first black woman ever on an Olympic hockey team, Leah Edwards. And
USA Hockey had a good year.
USA Hockey had a very good year. And then,
this year.
the show's on, and then just so much having to do with hockey. But this is, I call it a dramedy and sports movie. And it follows the exact train of every sports movie you've ever seen, which I like that. I mean, just like a rom-com, a romantic comedy, what's going to happen for the most part. So what's going to happen, the obstacles they're going to come up against, and you hope things turn out well for them. They don't always, but, essentially, what the beats are going to be. But this is different in the sense that I've got 70% women characters, 83% dialogue by women, and that's, completely unusual because you don't really get this. And these women are so funny. Now, I say that. I wrote what they said, so that's really pretty bad that I'm doing that. But honestly, Jeff, every time I read it, I start laughing and going on. So that's probably good. At least it amuses me, And
well, that is the first order of business, I think, for writers, that make sure you find it entertaining, and that explains the laurels. Because if you find it right, if you're writing it for someone else, you'll end up with nothing. But if you write something for yourself that you enjoy, other people will probably enjoy it.
Yeah.
But yeah, when someone sits down and tries to write, okay, by the way, if someone sat down after watching Heat Arrive and go, okay, I'm going to write something, it just wouldn't work. It has to come right. A screenplay, a story has to come from the right place, or it just won't resonate.
Yeah, exactly. And it was, it was demanding from me to be told.
Yeah.
And then
But after all the documentary, this was your first time sitting down and writing a screenplay?
Yes. I had written like short stories. Like there's one that I really...
But you've been reading them.
Yes, I've been reading them for a really long time.
Yeah.
And then watching films on them, of course. And but at the Cannes Film Festival last year, meaning in, I think, March or April, like almost a year ago, maybe May, Nicole Kidman said, when she gave her speech, she was accepting Women in Films Award or whatever, and she said, we need to make films with more women characters. We need to see women as they get older. She said, you write them, you write the films, and we'll make the films, and we'll show the producers that we'll make you money. So, Jeff Howard, I want to tell you, if you know Nicole Kidman, I want you to tell her, I've written the film, it's here, it's ready for you. Come and make it and make these people all this money.
It is true. And I often say to the young folk I meet, you realize if you write good characters that are over 60, the talent you will get for even an indie short, let alone an indie feature, leaps off the screen because the talent is so amazing.
Probably.
People have been doing it for 30, 40 years. Even if they're not famous, they're amazing, honestly. Right? As a juror for the festival, there is nothing like seasoned, amazing actors. Nothing against the young folk.
Well,
I respect, I love and respect young people, but especially those performers.
Yeah.
People have been doing it. We'll have people at the festival, who've those faces we've seen on TV 7,000 times, but they've never been the lead. But they've been on every TV show we've seen for 30 years.
Exactly.
And then they do a short, and they are so good, and they come to the festival. I'm like, I'll say, thank you for supporting this film. It's like, I love this young writer-director.
Right.
I worked with them. They were they played my daughter.
Yeah, they're supportive
on CSI. We had one scene together, and then she said to me, you will want to be in a short I'm making. And I'm like, hell yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just, and then the performances are so amazing.
They really
because they
are.
really know what the fuck they're doing.
And I have to say, my characters are not. I mean, I only have one person. The women on the team range in age from 16 to what they call their AARP representative, who's 55, And, of course, that's the really, really old person on there. But then
Well, there should, it's.
you
I doubt many
can't
people
be
are
playing
skating
hockey.
at 70.
Yeah, right. So, but I've got one of my absolute favorite characters is the coach, and his name's Coach Dobby, and he's up there, but he's going in all the time. And I got this from Louis Taylor. He says malaprops all the time, so he has we've got to go excavate the parking lot and head over to LA to the tournament, or he just uses all these malaprops.
That always makes me think of Ringo, because Ringo was famous for the malapropisms, and like hard day's night and things like that. Instead of a hard day's work, he said hard day's night.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, stuff. Yeah, he was famous for it. It's always great to say an old. It actually seems creative, right, to say an old phrase and renew it.
Yeah.
With some different words.
Yeah.
Well, excellent. So you just want to write this, though, or is there?
No, I have no desire elsewhere.
No desire. Maybe produce.
Because
you're basically the producer and probably director of the documentaries. So
yes, but this is so big, and
you gotta hand it off.
It's big. I got to hand it off. Yeah, I just want to write it, and so hopefully somebody with. Because I don't really think I have skill in those other areas to do something like this.
And it came from the personal experience, which is great. But do you want to write more? Did this spark a fire inside you to write another screenplay?
And in a lot of ways, no, it didn't. It did the opposite. It doused that fire because it's so hard. It is brutally hard to write a screenplay. To write a good screenplay, I think. And it's just very hard. I have so much admiration for all these people who are doing it. And it took so long. And so right now, since I'm not a marketing person. I don't know really what to do. I have to research everything and try to find it out. And so that's where I am right now. I don't want to distract myself in any way from trying to get this out there, and then we'll see if something else comes to mind.
Excellent. Boy, I wish I did know these people. Believe me.
Oh, they're so great.
Many years ago there was a script, and I was like, God, if you could just get someone I knew wrote it, and I was like, if you could just get this into Sandra Bullock's hands, she would make it, because it would be the perfect thing for her. But I'm sure lots of people think that all the time.
Well, and I went online, found out, all the women's production companies. By the way, when I wrote this, I always saw Queen Latifah playing this part. Now she's completely aged out of it, but remember, this is a long time ago. And I would never get to choose, but in my mind, I liked Queen Latifah a lot, and I liked the idea of her in that role. And Eugene Levy, I always saw as Coach Dobby, he was just perfect for it. So it was fun for me to just think of those people, and doing it. But Queen Latifah has a production company, Nicole Kidman, Reese Witherspoon, Rita Wilson. Who did you just mention?
Sandra Bullock.
Yeah, Sandra Bullock. I mean, all those people do, but getting it to those people, I don't really know how to do it. I mean, I'm working on it. Sending it out in ways that are as
it's a tough process.
Yeah.
I got all the empathy in the world for you, because the Lord knows it's tough, but you got the laurels, so hopefully that'll help you get in some doors
for sure,
and have some people listen. I don't know if everyone was throwing the name at you, but try to get it to Stephanie Haddish.
Okay.
Stephanie Haddish is a stand-up comedian and excellent actor, and is super talented. And when you said that Queen Latifah aged out, Stephanie Haddish is probably the perfect age. Oh. What can I say? And super talented, and might be one of my celebrity crushes. We're all allowed a celebrity crush or two.
Yes, we are, for sure. Well, I will follow up on that, and I'll tell her you said so.
Why not? Oh. If only. Who knows now? Knock on wood. We'll end up like with a film in the next festival, and like, oh my God, Stephanie Haddish is in the, no, that would be too lucky. But anyway.
Yeah.
Excellent. All right. Well, I think we're good.
Okay.
Do you want to?
Wonderful.
We'll wrap it up, and then we can. The podcast after this one in the feed will be your 4 questions, which I know you're looking forward to. But unless there's anything else you wanted to mention, but I think we got everything in.
I think so. Thank you so
Excellent.
much for having me on.
And needless to say, you know, I'll put in. We have. You gave us that you're on Instagram and Twitter X, so those will be clickable links in the show notes.
IMDb.
And people can. And people can reach out to you if they want. I don't even know if that happens, but I always say it.
Yeah.
And thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And and thank you everyone for listening. I'll do my wrap up now. Where first, if you want to learn more about this podcast, just go to discoverindiefilm.com. On social media, it's always at DIFwins. I am now almost a year and a half into my quitting of social media. It's very funny because your wonderful son always sends me messages on Facebook, and then like I don't see him for a month or two, and then I go on there and I'm like, I told you I'm not on Facebook anymore, man. Send me email. But anyway, that's just my way of thanking my wonderful podcast producer, Karina Wolf. Karina's the one on the social media for at DIFwins. So that is who will respond to you if you write anything to us. If you go to discoverindiefilm.org, that is the nonprofit that runs Sherman Oaks Film Festival and Film Invasion Los Angeles. Both are ranked in the top 100 best reviewed list by filmmakers worldwide out of 14,000 festivals. We got 2 of the top 100. And our next goal is to get their cut. So you go to discoverindiefilm.org to learn about those 2 festivals. And then they're cousins. I always call them sister festivals for some reason. I guess I should say sibling, but they're sisters. And their cousin in Lima, Peru was born this year, 2026, when we had Film Invasion Lima. And it went wonderfully. So there's going to be another one next year, actually Valentine's weekend, which turns out to be President's Day. So it's a 3-day weekend here in the States. So maybe we can get more people to fly down. We'll see. And honestly, it was because... for various reasons. This first year, Lima, it took place in mid-January. It's so soon after Christmas and New Year's that it was even hard to like get files and things from filmmakers because everyone people shut down for a week or two. And honestly, I do Sherman Oaks Film Festival the weekend after Thanksgiving, and then I need a little time to recharge. I couldn't even get down to Lima. I was like, I need a little break. So we moved it from January to February. And so that's Film Invasion Lima. All right, Lesley, thank you so much.
Thank you, Joe.
This was a lot of fun.
My pleasure.
And a total honor. And right after I hit stop, we will start recording again after I tell you about a friend of mine who also does some good justice stuff. Totally love the justice stuff. All right. Anyway, thank you everyone for listening.